think we got to have a conversation around, hey, what's real in college football? And this isn't a prediction segment. This isn't a segment where we call our shot. We actually may do some of that next week around this time, where we talk about where things stand and kind of reset the playoff race and things like that. But what can we trust right now in college football? I think there's a couple of things, and the first of which being, which is kind of, I think, refreshing for a lot of us, is that Texas is a legitimate college football playoff contender. Some of y'all might say, well, JD, you're jumping the gun there. Red River this week, what if Oklahoma does what Oklahoma can do and they end up beating Texas? Like, I still think Texas is a legitimate college football playoff contender. They could lose in Red River, run the table the rest of the way, win the Big 12, and I still think they'd be in the dance. Now, we've already predicted Texas to win Red River, just full transparency. But the thing with Texas is they have it all on paper, right? It's not necessarily extremely new, but it is to a degree to the level they have it at. Like, to have a quarterback like Quinn Ewers, like, that's saying something. The weapons they have, Jatavian Sanders, Jordan Whittington, Adonai Mitchell, Xavier Worthy. Like, we could go down the list here. They got legitimate weapons, a lot of guys that will play in the NFL for a long time. They have a legitimate defense here. Bobby Burton from Inside Texas was on the show not that long ago. I believe it was earlier this week, breaking down Oklahoma, Texas. And he's like, they have an adult defense. And what he means by adult defense, they got guys that have played some football, that have been in the program for a while, juniors and seniors. So they've got a level of maturity, and we saw that play itself out at Alabama. And that's great to have it on paper, but I think what they really have that makes them more of a playoff contender to me is they have it on the line of scrimmage, and they don't just have it on paper, they have it in practice. They've shown what they have on paper in practice as well from a skill position point of view, but they have it in practice on the line of scrimmage in the sense that the big boys on the offensive and defensive line, those are the individuals that win you hardware. They're averaging 5 yards a carry offensively. They're allowing 3 yards a carry defensively. That's really good, especially given the competition they've had to play, because you bake in Alabama into the equation of what they've done on the line of scrimmage. Like, this is a legitimate line of scrimmage football team. And we've seen them also culturally answer the call to action there as well. Like, in that game on the road in Tuscaloosa in Bryant-Denny Stadium with game day there, and that place is packed to the brim, and it was an electric atmosphere. We were there for this one. Like, if you're going to crack and to have your culture kind of wilt, it would have been in that spot on the road. All the hype in the world around you. Lee Corso throws on the headgear for Texas. He picked Texas to win that football game. It would have been around that game where we would have seen Texas kind of show their humanity and say, a lot of talent, still not there yet. Texas could have scored again at the end of that game. They were driving. It was a party on the field as the clock ran out. Like, Texas was imposing their will on Alabama, who is historically one of the best line of scrimmage football teams of the modern era under Nick Saban. Then you play Kansas before Red River. And that's the ultimate take your eye off the ball game. Kansas, for all their shortcomings, even though Jalen Daniels didn't play in this game, still, it would have been an opportunity to say, well, hey, their best player's not playing. Get out of your game plan. Just think the game should be handed to you. There were times, too, where Kansas challenged in that football game, and there was zero flinch from Texas. Just kept their eye on the ball. No problem. Handle what we got to do. Stick to the plan. Get out of there with a dub. We haven't always seen Texas be that kind of football team, especially the way they played in the second half in both those games. We haven't seen Texas be a second half football team. This is a different Texas. A lot of talk around, is Texas back? You know how we feel about that. People that say Texas is back or Texas is not back are focused on one thing, clicks. They're focused on clicks. They're focused on thumbnails. They're focused on selling t-shirts. We're telling you, don't worry about the Texas is back talk. Texas is for real. The way they're built, what they've shown in practice, what they have on paper on this roster, Texas is for real. You can take that to the bank. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you're locked in here. We don't want you to miss a minute of what we got going on the hard count. We appreciate y'all in advance for that. Also follow me on Instagram and on Twitter at JDPikel. We appreciate y'all in advance for that. Another thing that I think is for real when it comes to the college football landscape, Oregon is the best team on the West Coast. I understand Caleb Williams is the best player in college football. I understand Michael Penix and Washington have put up just video game numbers offensively. I get all that. Oregon is the best team on the West Coast. Now, when I say that, I'm not telling you Oregon's going to win the Pac-12. I'm not making that prediction. Maybe we'll do that next week. I don't know. But Oregon is the most complete team in the Pac-12. And if the Pac-12 were to put a team into the college football playoff, if I'm a Pac-12 fan and I'm just rooting openly for the West Coast and for the Pac-12, I would hope and pray that it's Oregon. Because Oregon is a team that I think on the line of scrimmage could hold up against a team like a Georgia, like a Bama, like an Ohio State, like a Michigan, because of the way they're built on the line of scrimmage. And let's just look at the numbers here. Numbers don't tell the entire story, but they give us a pretty good gauge. Yards per carry for Oregon right now, 6.2. Good for number 6 in the country. Yards per carry allowed, 3.1. Good for number 15 in the country. Look at USC, look at Washington. Washington, 4.7 yards per carry. It's pretty good. They're allowing around 4 yards a carry. It's only a yard, so it doesn't sound like it's that much. I promise you that adds up. It's not great. It's not what you want when you go play a team like a Michigan if you're Washington. USC, they're averaging 6.3 yards a carry. So they're running the football really, really well. And their offense is, ridiculous, as is Washington's. No one's arguing with that. They're giving up 4 yards a carry as well. Now, I understand there's different filters with opponents these teams have played, and there's things that you got to, kind of assess when it comes to all three of these. But the way that Oregon is built up front, in addition to what they have at the quarterback position with Bo Nix, and the way they've improved that secondary, this is the most complete football team on the West Coast. So do they play for the Pac-12? Do they win the college football playoff? We'll see. They're my pick probably right now to come out of the Pac-12 if we had to re-rack today. But Oregon, the most complete team in the Pac-12, the best team on the West Coast, and I think they're the team that you feel best about matching up with those big boys from other conferences. And they will match up with other conferences here pretty soon as Oregon moves to the Big Ten, and Dan Lanning leads that charge. Penn State, man, this is a new Penn State. This is not a Penn State of old. And there's a couple of things that factor into that. But the obvious one is, hey, they have a new gear offensively. Drew Aller. He's the man. He's looked as advertised to this point. 9 touchdowns, no picks, 64% completion percentage. Like, there's no sign of that first-year quarterback syndrome from him. But I think the thing that we really need to talk about with Penn State, what do you always hear when people talk about Drew Aller? I promise you, one of the buzzword phrases is, hey, this kid can make all the throws. Well, if a kid can make all the throws, what does that really mean? Well, defensively, it means you have to respect and defend all the throws. It means you can't stack the box. It means you can't bring a safety down. You can if you want to, but he'll throw it past you. So when you play honest defensively, then that backfield gets to eat. Then those big boys up front get to eat. Then you get to play downhill, ground and pound, smash mouth. And if they don't want to honor that, like I said, then the vertical pass game becomes an element for Penn State. Now, on top of that, that's a big piece of this. Like, they've really, I think, become much more dangerous and have a new gear offensively. But defensively, we've kind of taken for granted how good Penn State is right now on defense. Like, nationally, the quarterback obviously gets a lot of the headlines because that's the most fun to talk about. But defensively, they are top 10 in virtually every single category. They're giving up 10 points a game. Top 3 in the country. They're giving up 3.6 yards a play. Not a run, 3.6 yards a play. Good for number 1 in the country. They can put pressure on you to score points with the offense, and then they can just choke you out defensively. Like today, if we had to pick the game, that's October 21st at Ohio State for Penn State, I'd have a really hard time not picking Penn State because of what they have on the defensive side of the ball. They're deep as all get out over there too. It's not like they just have one line of defense and then after that there's a big drop off. Like, they are deep on the defensive side. I think they're actually more deep on the offensive side as well than what's given credit for. Penn State, at this point in time, we don't have a great gauge for Michigan, but I think you got to put them somewhere in the top 2 within the Big Ten. I understand Ohio State has that win over Notre Dame, so we're kind of reaching a little bit with this conversation, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page with how seriously we need to take Penn State. Penn State's not Penn State of old. This is a new Penn State, and that is 1,000% for real, especially with the way they're built right now. Last thing that I think is for real right now when you talk about the college football landscape, Notre Dame still has a very real path to the college football playoff. And they're not going away. Like, Notre Dame, the easy thing to say is, well, they lost one game and they don't have that data point, so wipe your hands of this, Notre Dame, that's it, good season. Maybe you make a New Year's Six bowl. The way that their resume could shake out, you have the one loss to Ohio State, top 10 team, last second on the at home rather, 10 guys on the field. It is what it is. That sucks. There's no way around it. Then you have the win against Duke on the road, which is a ranked win. You go to Louisville this week, which would actually be a sneaky ranked win. And then you play USC at home, and then you play Clemson at Clemson. So you're rooting for all those teams to continue to play well and hopefully make your resume look a little bit better. But if they win out and they win out with style, I would have a very difficult time personally, if I'm the committee, keeping them out. And I think the reason why we need to talk about Notre Dame a little bit more seriously, like it's not a gimmick. It's not a gimmick where we talk about Notre Dame and it's like, well, they still have a chance, and then they get to the playoff and they just get throttled. Like they sneak in as a 4 seed, and then we see Notre Dame do what Notre Dame has done the past couple of years and just get blown out by Clemson or Alabama, or, that's what we've seen from them. I don't think that's this Notre Dame team. I mean, I think there's a very real argument to be made that they were the better team that night when they lost to Ohio State. You can look at the box score, and I think you can see that they played as well as Ohio State that night, and they played well enough to win, but they shot themselves in the foot too many times situationally. It is what it is. You don't get credit for almost winning a football game, but I just think when we assess Notre Dame, if we're just using our eyes, if we're not looking at the resumes and we're not looking at the stats, like if we're just using our eyes and Notre Dame does win out, I think it's very, very difficult to say they're not one of the top 4 teams in the country. I understand there's the college football playoff conversation with conference titles and all that, but if we're just using our eyes, we're just using common sense, and the goal is to pick the best 4 teams in the country, and Notre Dame wins out with style, which is a big if, I think you would have to put them in that top 4 for me at this point in time. But again, going back to what's real, not to project too much here, what's real is Notre Dame has a path to the college football playoff. What's real is you still have to talk about Notre Dame when it comes to the college football playoff conversation. You have to take them seriously. Now, how wide is that path? We're going to continue to get a gauge for that. But it definitely exists, and it's not a path that just directly leads to a New Year's Six bowl game or to some other bowl game. Like, the playoff is definitely an attainable thing for the Fighting Irish, for Marcus Freeman, because of Sam Hartman. So that's kind of what's real in college football right now, and that's how we feel about those situations, and we're going to keep an eye on them and get a better gauge going forward. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.